Okay then, so here we go with the Unreal stuff. So I've downloaded Epic, the Epic launcher. So let's open it up there. There we go. And if you've never used it before, it's very, very easy. On the left-hand side here, you'll have like Store and Library and Home, and I've clicked Store, unfortunately, so that's going to take me somewhere else. Let me just clear that from the last video. There we go. Library, Unreal Engine, and then Fab. Unreal Engine is obviously where we want to go because that's what we're going to be using. And then in Library, so here, this is where you can start adding your versions, or you can see your past projects. So you can see I've got a bunch of projects here. You'll have no versions at first, and it'll tell you to install 5.7. You can install 5.7 and do your own stuff in it, but for my work, make sure you install 5.6.1 or 5.6. Whatever. And you can do that by clicking up here, install new version. It's going to give you, so when I click the little plus sign, it's going to give you the option of installing something. And in this drop down, you just choose the version you want to install from here. Now, because I've got 5.6 already installed, it isn't on this list, but yours should have 5.6.1. Now let's get rid of that. So that's the one we're going to be using. There's no point using 5.4. In fact, I'm just going to uninstall that. Now 5.7 and 5.6 do not communicate with each other. They don't like each other. So this is why we really want to be careful not to, do work in 5.7, because you can't then take it back to 5.6. You can take stuff from 5.6 up to 5.7, but not the other way around. Okay, so I'm going to launch 5.6.1. And you'll have this window pop up. If you've never loaded up Unreal, it's going to take a little bit of time at first to load up Unreal, because it has to build all the framework and stuff behind the scenes. But when you do that, what you'll be greeted with is this. And this is just asking you, what do you want to do? What are we working on? Well, you've got games, TV and film, architecture, automotive product design, and simulation, as well as the recent projects for obviously everything you've worked on. You can see projects. And it will also tell you the version underneath that you've been working on. So in games, you've got some stuff. You can have a look through stuff. And like I was saying, have a play, have an experiment. See what this ArcViz one's all about. Have a play. But what we're going to be using is games, obviously, and then we're going to be using third person, because we're actually going to be building with the control system in mind. So that's all we need to do. Again, have the play, see what all these other things will do. But we're going to be building off third person. And it explains a little bit about third person. That's all well and good. Here, where it says project defaults, blueprint, that's perfectly fine. Just leave that. Don't change it to C++, because then I can't help you. Target platform, desktop. We'll keep it desktop. Quality presets, maximum. Keep it maximum. And variant, no, just keep it none. Because we're not building an actual game. We're just using the control system. And then underneath, we've got the same stuff we had in Maya. We've got the project name, so let's call it something. So I'm going to call it Cabin Scene. UE, there we go. So it knows, so at least I know that that's a UE folder and not the Maya folder. Exactly, was, as you saw then, it wasn't even letting me call it that. And then I'm going to stick it on the desktop, the same thing we did with the other one. We just make sure we tell it to desktop, select, go into desktop. Because it's probably going to put it in some obscure Unreal folder. Cool. And we're good to go. So that's everything set up. We're doing games, third person, all the default settings here, just leave them alone, give it a name, sensible name obviously. We're dealing with a cabin scene, so you might as well do something around that, and then put it to the desktop. And then we create. And then it's going to create project, we'll get the little flag up again that's going to load. And again, if you've never used Unreal before, it'll take a little bit more time to do this because it has to build stuff in the background. Okay, so this is Unreal. Again, those who've used it before, this is familiar. Those who haven't, don't worry about it. So we will do a little bit of talking about how to navigate and stuff around Unreal. It's relatively simple. I do have a lot of people complain about moving from Maya or a different software to Unreal, or moving around different softwares. It's just part and parcel of the game, unfortunately. These are all built with different, jobs in mind, so they have to be built with different control systems. But they're not wildly different from each other. Okay? So what have we got going on? Top here, we've got drop-down menus for stuff. We'll be using some of these sometimes, again, just like Maya. We won't really be using all of them. But there's in file, you've got new level, open level, project, edit stuff. Rarely will be going into this. A lot of this information already exists here in our viewport. On the left hand side here, you got outliner. So we've already seen one of those in Maya. Same jazz. Whatever is in the scene is represented here. On the right hand side, you got details, and just like in Maya, your details tab is almost like the channel box, where it just gives you the details of the object. However, being Unreal and it having a lot more kind of functionality, there's a lot more information inside here. Again, we're going to be using a little bit of it, but not all of it. There's some of this which is more like programmer based, or data layers. I've never used it. Half of this I've never used because I don't need to with my job. So that's details. At the bottom, you've got content browser, or yours might be docked. Depending on. This is probably my own default window, my own kind of like. What do you call it? If I just default layout. Right, there we go. So this is the default layout. So you can see mine. It's a little bit different. I've manually changed mine. So we've still got the outliner here. Still got the details tab that is in different areas. That channel box isn't here, but if I just move myself over here for now, that channel box is actually down here, or the content browser, content drawer, is actually down here, and you click it and it opens it up, and if you click off it, it disappears. I've got mine permanently docked to the bottom of the screen because I think as artists we're often going into the content drawer and pulling stuff out and changing stuff, so I just like having it open. Up at the very top, you've got like save, open. This is, again, if we were doing more complex stuff, this is just like in Maya. It changes what our function, what our stuff is, but selection mode is our standard stuff. This little cube with a plus on is our quick add menu, and we can add stuff which is commonly used inside here. We'll be using this a lot. And then some stuff like this is your world editor menu. You don't need to worry about this. This we're going to be using near the end of the year, possibly. This is how we're going to do our videos and stuff. Play. Well, that's play, innit? Click play and you can play. Woohoo! There you go. And then there's versions of that. Platforms, just leave that alone. That's if you're doing like proper development and you can actually change what platform you're going on. Underneath here, we've got some fun stuff. So this is the stuff. I mean, it says what it is. It's this is selection mode. Q, W, E, and R. Oh, interesting. We've seen those before. So select, translate, rotate, and scale. They're all exactly the same as Maya. Easy. Coordinates. So this is something we've not really spoke about too much, but there is a world and an object coordinate. If you have something which you've rotated and you switch it to local coordinate or object space, it means that if I rotate it that way and I rotate it that way, that all my stuff is now facing that direction. But if it's set to world, then X is always X, Y is always Y, Z is always Z. And some other stuff. Again, this is your best. This little bit here is representing scale, movement, rotate, select and stuff. This is the change of world and object, which is all very exciting. Magnetizing, toggle where objects snap to this. So these three here are very, very useful. So I'll show you obviously how to move in a second. So these here, they're snaps. They're already kind of built in. They're already turned on, but they're set to units. So this is set to 10, and what this is doing is going to snap every 10 units when I move it. Snap. It's a bit hard to see. We can see how it's snapping a little bit. But if I change that to say 100, now it's snapping every 100 units. Now I said before that Maya works in centimeters and Unreal works in meters, same family, different sizes. When we say 100 here, we're actually talking about 100 centimeters. So this is actually snapping to meters. If we set it to 50, that's half meters. If we set it to 10, that's a tenth of a meter or 10 centimeters. 500, that's 5 meters, and so on and so forth. Depending on what you're doing, you'll need different snap scales. I always tend to have mine set to 100. This is snapping to 10 degrees, so when I rotate, it's going to snap to 10 degrees, which is very, very nice. Unless I want like the ever so slight offset of stuff. And the scale, this is set to 0.25% scale. So it's going to scale in these kind of snaps. Perspective, these are like camera-based stuff. We'll talk about this when we come to need it. Camera speed, I'll talk about that in a second. This drop down is basically how we can view the world. So you can see the wireframe, which is, ooh, isn't it nice? We can see just a wireframe. We can see unlit, which basically means everything without light. So just straight color. Reflections, lighting only. Again, explore these. Those reflections look like, ooh. Some of this is obviously very useful to work in. Some of it is totally useless for us to work in. And then we've got this is basically what we're going to see on screen. What can we see on screen? This is performance. This is settings. And this is kind of viewport changes here on the very, very end. And in the viewport, that's basically it. Not a lot. And like I said, we're only going to use a little bit. And we're going to use stuff in very, very small increments and stuff. So the project's actually already set up. We've already made the project. Done. We don't even need to save anything because when we create the project, Unreal has created that project folder with all the corresponding folders on the inside. So let's just go look at said folder. Make sure there's nothing incriminating on my desktop. There you go. Boom. So it's created this cabin scene UE. Now when we move this around, we want to move this entire folder, nothing else. We want to move this entire folder. Inside that folder is very, very important files. We've got the actual scene itself, so this is essentially the game, this little icon at the bottom. And then all these are corresponding folders which contain content, obviously. All the content we'll put goes in here, but we don't need to put it in here ourselves. We kind of import it and it automatically gets updated there. Configs, stuff that basically makes the engine run. Do not, I'm going to underline this now, do not move these folders on their own. Like drag these onto the OneDrive, drag these onto the hard drive. You drag the folder they're all in. So you drag this folder instead. Same with Maya, don't drag the internal folders, drag the whole folder itself. I often refer to this as like, this is the house, these are the rooms. So you have to take the entire house to keep all the rooms. The reason being is a lot of this stuff, as I've said, is it needs connections. It needs to know where certain things are. And if you just start moving files around randomly, it loses connection. You'll open up the scene and then none of your content's there. All the blueprints are gone. All the game assets are gone. The level might be there, but it's empty because it doesn't know where all that content is. It doesn't know where the geometry is, the materials. So you've got two files to move that have all the internal files. I'm expecting some people to make this mistake, but it's totally fine. It is salvageable as long as we can salvage all those folders, because there's like these 6 folders in the inside that we need to keep hold of. But that's good. Project's done. So how do we navigate? As you saw, I did a bit of moving around before. Whee, like this. Moving around in Unreal is I think it's really easy, but some people, I think because it's a foreign way of working, they have a bit of trouble with it. PC gamers hopefully will pick this up fast. If I hold right click on the mouse and then I WASD, I can move around and it moves. It's like almost like I'm flycam. So as I move the mouse around, it's going that direction. So I'm like Superman at the minute. And I can pan so that's A and D there. S to move backwards. Again, it does depend on if I'm where I'm facing it is what direction I go. Q lowers me down, and E lifts me up. So WASD, Q and E. And I'm just holding down right click there. That's all I'm doing. You can hold down left click and push, and that kind of does like almost like a walk, and it holds the camera angle. So I can walk around like this. And if I hold Alt when I do this, I'm almost doing like an orbit cam kind of thing. And that's basically it. And that's just holding right click there. I'm not doing anything with my left hand, I'm literally just holding right click. So it's really simple. But that's again why you want that left hand by the keyboard all the time, because you're going to be moving around all the time. Whee! And again, one fun thing to do is literally just spend a bit of time moving around, getting used to controls. Easy. Easy. So, project set up. Hopefully we'll get into grips with the actual, flying around and stuff. If we press play, we can go in there and start to move around. This is our little. This is Quinn, the mannequin. You've got Manny and Quinn who live in Unreal. They're our friends. Now we'll be changing this control system so that we're not running, we're walking, and so that the camera is in a much better position for what we're doing. Because this is a standard third person. It does like a basic third person, and there's very easy things to do to change the run speed of the character and the camera position of the character. Again, we're not game designers. We're not actually doing like a proper game. So we're not going to be looking into how to replace this with a proper character, how to set up the animation, how to finesse the walking controls so that the camera feels better. Because at the end of it, we're not actually going to use it for our demonstration, because we're going to do a fly-through video. What we're using this for is to make sure that as a player, we're thinking about how this environment feels. As I'm walking around, does it feel like a good environment for a third-person game? Or does it feel more like a first-person with bigger open spaces? Or does it feel too claustrophobic? And can we actually move and ambulate through the environment? And I can press escape to come out of play mode. So really fun stuff. There's a few of the things that I'm going to look at just before I close the video out. Probably about 25 minutes, I reckon, this video. So as I'm walking around, you're going to see there might be a few little icons floating around. What are they? If you don't see them, if you just see something like this, press G. G for get. Because that just basically turns on the gizmos. These are called gizmos. So what's happening? Let's go for the top one. This one. This is what we call a sky atmosphere. And what this does is it allows us to have atmosphere, actual distance and fog and this kind of stuff. That's all it's doing. And there are settings to it, and you can do stuff and have fun with it. Again, have a play with it. It's quite a powerful little tool. The one below it, this is a directional light. So this is the thing that's actually controlling the light in the scene. So I'm rotating around there. Movie. And because of things like the skylight, which is something down here, the fog and the sky atmosphere and stuff, when we rotate this, it actually does give us dusk and night. We don't have stars or anything like that. We just goes black. But it gives us that impression. So we can have, like noon, sunny, white light, or we can have dusk. And we actually have a lot. So you can see there's the sun over there. And if we turn off the sky atmosphere and stuff, the light is there, as we can see, but the atmosphere is making it like realistic. And again, the settings to do with that in the details tab. This one down here is your volumetric clouds. So that's your clouds. And that doesn't really do much. That can't be rotated or anything. But there are settings again to have fun with. Have a play. And the one below it is a skylight, and this is in lighting. In the real world, you have bounce lighting. Some of you might already know this. Obviously, you talk about with Alex. You've got light coming down to a surface on a ball. That light's obviously going to hit the ground and bounce up back into the object. This is essentially doing that. It's facilitating that bounce light to give us a more realistic lighting setup. So these are what a lot of people use as like the initial starting off point for lighting. Lighting is a whole thing in games and 3D. It's actually quite difficult to get really amazing lighting because lighting is a science. But it's not impossible, obviously, and there is a lot of call for lighting artists, proper lighting artists. There's our light. Right, there's this cube right here. There's a cube. This is called a post-processing volume. And what this does is anything which is inside the cube, so as a player, when we walk inside the cube or when the camera passes through it, it basically does Photoshop. But only when you're inside. So I'm just going to scale it up a little bit, like that. And in the details tab, so I'm just going to raise this up a little bit. In the details tab, you got a load of stuff here with it selected. And we've got bloom and exposure, chromatic aberration. So if I turn on stuff like chromatic aberration, Oh, it's just got infinite inbound. It's an infinite inbound, yeah. Okay, ignore this bit. There we go. So chromatic aberration. Well, chromatic aberration is, I call it broken TV syndrome. It's where red and blue, maybe green channels get separated. So it's being weird outside. Red, blue, and green channels get separated at the edges of the screen. But I'm increasing it, and it should be quite intense. But I can't see anything. But if I move my camera inside, now it starts to appear. Move out, goes away, move in, there we go. So, you know, I can do exposure, I can expose, blow out the camera. Go back to normal, blow out the camera. Back to normal. So post-processing volume it's really important because it's all about the way that the scene looks, and we can only go so far with what we do in Maya and Paint and with basic lights and stuff. We can only go so far. But, you know, in films, TV, games, there's a lot of color correcting, color grading, especially if you want to push that kind of emotion of the scene, or, you know, you want to boost the colors because it's a very, very childlike game, so you want to just push the colors a little bit more. The settings for that in there. If you want to have, if we're thinking more technically, if you want to have something where the more damage a player takes, the more desaturated the screen gets, that can be tied to this, where you can actually have it. You can tie the information that controls the player health and actually tie it to a saturation slider inside here. You can have multiple setup as well. So I've got one here, but I can have multiple where I can move from place to place. You know, it's all open to how you're going to use it. But as you saw then, it was only when I was inside the box it did anything. But at the very top of the search bar here, in the little details tab, I'm going to type in inf, INF. So that filters everything that's got INF in it, obviously. So at the bottom we've got infinite, extend, unbound. Basically what this does is it does the entire scene. So instead of being like just inside the box, the entire scene gets influenced. So if you're just thinking this whole thing's going to get just going to get washed with the same settings, that's how you do it. Very, very nice. So now we've got a nice chromatic aberration. There we go. And then when I press play, obviously, boom, the chromatic aberration is taking effect. You can see the channel splitting, and I call it broken TV syndrome. Cool. I'll just turn that off because it can get a little bit hurt to look at for a bit. So boom, there we go. And the last thing in this area is this. Now this is important because this is called the player start. And wherever I move this, or whatever angle and direction I face it, this is where I start. So I'm going to move this over here. F to focus, by the way. Just like in Maya, I can click F and to focus. And you can see the little arrow pointing outwards, so I'm going to face that direction. So when I press play, I now face that direction. But what if I want to drop my player in? We want to do a bit of player unknown battleground, whatever it's called. Boop, there we go. So your player start is your player start. That's where the player starts. Very cool. And last but not least, I'll just look at this section here. So we've got this content drawer, like I said. So in here is going to be all our stuff. Again, organization. Don't just dump files in here and expect to deal with stuff nicely. Organize your stuff. What happens if I right click? Oh, I get this menu. What's on this menu? New folder right at the top. If I click that, hey, a new folder's been added, and I can name it, so I'm going to call it geometry. Spelled wrong, obviously, but geometry. So, cool, so all my actual objects are going to go inside there. What if I do it again, and this time I'm going to go material. Now all my materials are going to go in there. What if I go into the material folder and I make a texture folder? Now all my textures are going to go in this folder, which is within the material folder. What about if I go into the textures folder and I go wooden floor? There you go. So all textures wooden floor. So you can see it can be nice and organized with stuff. In here, you will have some stuff, so you'll again explore it. Character, what's in there? Mannequin. You've got animations, materials, meshes, rigs, and textures. That's the figure we were walking around with before. If I click content up here, it'll just go back to the contents folder. Geometry is what I've just made, so that's empty. Input is the control system. So if I just take an Xbox controller that I have here, I click on it. There you go. So I can use an Xbox controller to do my stuff. So boom. The input system is basically making controls depending on what you're doing. Are you making controls for the iBox, for the iPad, the Android? Are you making touchscreen? Are you making controls? Are you making WASD? Are you making VR? Are you making some sort of weird peripheral? Whatever. Again, that's more of something we don't have to worry about. That's a programmer's thing to do. Or if you get the bug, you'll learn how to do basic kind of control systems. It's not actually that hard, if I can do it. So that's where the inputs. Your inputs are literally like control inputs. Level prototyping, that's basically everything you see here. So this is all assets from the level prototyping folder to help you prototype. And again, there's messages and texts. Materials, we've just made that, whatever. Third person, so this is... It's best not to mess around with this, because third person, inside this folder, is where you've got the really important stuff. So if I move myself up here this time. So you've got blueprints. And then you've got these three things here. These are what makes that character work, as well as telling the game engine that the camera needs to be in this position, using this control system, it needs to have these parameters, it needs to move like this, the gravity needs to work this way. So just don't mess with this stuff. Unless we tell you to, don't mess with this stuff. We will actually be going into... So, scary. We will actually be going into here to change the position of the camera and stuff later. So that's third person. And when you first start off a project, you'll probably just have like geometry and material or whatever. But as a project gets longer and longer and longer, and because I've got my own personal projects, these projects might start taking on more complexity. So I've got inventory systems, I've got combat systems, and these are all in their own little folders, and they have to be organized because it's just going to be really difficult to sift through loads and loads and loads and loads of different things to try and, if I go into materials, for instance, loads of different materials. If I'm not organized, I'm going to have a mare of a time trying to figure out what's what. Meshes, all this kind of stuff, textures. I'm going to have a mare of a time. It's going to be horrible. So keep it organized and you'll be good. And it's all very, very simple. I have to admit, I have to kind of really stress that. The learning curve at the beginning is going to be it's going to be a bit difficult, but that's just because a lot of you have never used Unreal. But it is simple and it is awesome. I love Unreal. But there's stuff in here you can look at as well. So you got add. This is basically doing the same thing as when I right click here. If I add, I can add stuff, and we'll be adding stuff into these using blueprints, levels, all that kind of jazz. Import, well that's import. We're going to be talking about importing when we come to it. Save all. Fab is the asset store essentially. So I've used this for a couple of things for free stuff, just for like placeholder stuff or audio stuff, or whatever. I've used this to help me. I'll never keep the stuff in for my own projects. I'll always get rid of it. It's just there to kind of help me at the beginning. But what I don't want you to do is use any Fab stuff in your own work, obviously. Though, so you will not go to Fab for me. And then you've got like essentially, just like in like any kind of like, file folder, you got at the top, you got basically the address of where you are. That's basically what this is. Up at the top here. Now there's lots of other little buttons everywhere, but we'll only use them if and when we need to use them. The last thing I do for this, and this is purely personal, is I just change the layout, because this is all nice and good, but for me, I like to see more information, and I like a little bit more kind of space with some stuff. So I'm going to go to Content Drawer at the bottom, and I'm going to click Dock to Layout, which is over here. Dock to Layout. Dock in Layout, I should say. If I click that, it docks the content browser into the window. So now when I click off it, it doesn't disappear, because I really get annoyed by that when it disappears. It's a new thing they put in 5 point whatever. Don't like it. So I like my dock being there. I also like to see my outliner a lot more. Like, this is a bit too compressed, so I click and drag that outliner, and you'll see it kind of asks to snap to certain areas. So I'm going to drag it all the way to the right until it does this. There we go. So now I can compress that down. I'm even going to... There we go. Yeah, that's good enough. So I'm just gonna. Now I have to admit, I'm not usually using Unreal on this monitor. I've got a ultra wide, which is ultra wide. So this real estate does really work for me, because now I've got a lot more space in the middle for this, and then these are nice and comfortable either side of me. But you use whatever you feel most comfortable with. This is annoying that this is so big here, so I'm just gonna. Yeah, there you go. Boom. Just isolate this. Grab what I want. There we go. Boom. I just need that. That's all I need. Just like Maya. I know what's what. Now we're going to look at it when we're actually doing stuff. You can even add folders into here. So I can be really organized. I can put all my geometry in one folder, and then in that folder I can also have subfolders for floor geometry, wall geometry, windows, I can have a lighting folder. I can have a blueprint object folder. I can do whatever I want. It's very, very cool. So that's it. Like, at this point, we are now ready to begin our project. We're ready to do stuff. So in the next video, we're actually going to be bringing stuff in from one software to another. From Maya, making basic stuff, bringing it into Unreal, getting it in, understanding some really important aspects of this whole process. But we'll talk about that in that video. So, cool. In the next one.